Hey guys, it's Mystical Storms here with another fanfic. This is a one-shot, but also at the same time it does have like a two-part series, so there is technically a second part to it that I'm guessing you won't really need to know this to understand, but at the same time it usually depends. You'll probably know in the next one. I'll let you guys know if it's going to be needed or not to listen to this one. I'm still going to put it inside the same playlist, but I'm also going to categorize it as a one-shot. So this is a 4,200 word fic, approximately, and yeah, it's called a Vigilante Teaching at UA, and it's written by Silver Roses and Dragons. And let's get started. Izuku was honestly surprised when Eraserhead had asked him to teach for the men's class at UA, and was hesitant at first, regardless of how much he trusted Eraser. "I would rather you join my class," he admitted, "but since you're still being stubborn, I'd like you to help them learn." After working with the Underground Pro for over a year, after the man had taught him so much that has kept him alive, Izuku trusts the man more than he has ever trusted anyone in his life. He knows this man cares for and more importantly believes in him. So, against his better judgment, Izuku agrees to guest teach for a bunch of kids the same age as him. He had a meeting with Nezu to work out his permission to be on the grounds. He was and wasn't allowed to do as a teacher how many lessons he could teach to start with and pay. Izuku really tried to convince both Nezu and Eraserhead that they didn't have to pay him. He agreed because Eraser taught him so much and he likely wouldn't still be alive without the man. So, of course, he would return the favor by helping the man's students. But Nezu insisted on paying him like he would do any guest teacher at 2,000 yen per hour long lesson that he teaches. He has a lot more freedom in his lessons than he would have expected, but apparently UA is just like that. Now, Izuku is entering UA grounds for the second time in his life. The first time is having a meeting with Nezu. The school is just as impressive as it was the first time he was here. He doesn't let himself get distracted by it. As much as he has a class to teach. Once he's in the school, Izuku ducks into an alcove to pull himself into the vents, which connects to the hidden system of tunnels that even most of the teachers didn't know about. Izuku is incredibly glad that Nezu gave him access to the tunnels because they have become essential for the first lesson plan. Izuku makes his way to the vents over Class 1A where Eraser is teaching his lesson to his homeroom. Izuku sets a stopwatch on his watch and drops out of the vents as quietly as possible. Luckily, Eraser knew that this was his plan, so there wasn't even a moment of hesitation or surprise as the man continues his lesson. Izuku kept a close eye on the class, which he is behind. One girl with earphone jacks dangling from her ears turns around when his feet hits the desk, to see him sliding the vent cover back on. He winks at her and holds a finger to the front of his mouth over his fabric surgical mask. And she looks at him suspiciously for a moment before seemingly realizing that her teacher must have seen the man in full costume at the back of the room he didn't raise the alarm at the back of the room, and it didn't raise the alarm. And if he didn't raise the alarms, then she didn't have to either. Next, a student with 6 arms, one which was an ear on the end of instead of a hand, twisted the ear towards the back of the room as Izuku said settling to sit on top of a bookshelf that is only half of the height of the ceiling, right under the vent, next to the other shelf that goes all the way to the ceiling. Nezu totally designed it that way. The student then turns one of their other arms with an eye, turns to look at Izuku, blinks at him through the rest of the boy's body, shows no reaction. Nice. Izuku opens his notebook in his hands and writes Jiro 30 seconds, and next in line, Shoji 50 seconds. Extra point for subtlety, versatile use of his quirk. Glad he had been given basic information about each student in his class, including a picture of them. Both of the students that noticed him first have quirks that used to enhance their hearing, which isn't surprising. Then Izuku noticed the purple-haired boys watching him out of the corner of his eye, keeping one eye on the Vigilante and the other one on Eraserhead at the front of the room. The Vigilante smiles and writes Shinzo. Under 1 minute, points for subtlety, first student without a hearing quirk. He has heard a lot about Hitoshi from Eraser, and is glad to see he's living up to Izuku's expectations. Those three definitely passed their first test, but hopefully they won't be the only ones. The class has 5 minutes to notice him, though the first minute would theoretically be the easiest because the only sound he was making now that he settled around reading and writing. But those sounds could come from anyone in the class, considering most of the students were taking notes on Eraser's lecture. After another 2 minutes or so, a dark shape hops at the back of a uniform of a student with a head of a raven. The shadow stares at Izuku for a moment before nudging the back of the student's shoulder, causing him to turn his head enough to see Izuku out of one eye. The student turns back to the front of the class, while the shadow continues to watch Izuku. Smart. Tokoyami. 3 minutes and 6 seconds, using shadow for surveillance, goes in his notebook. The student behind Tokoyami, the one with the red and white hair, watches this, then turns himself to see that what dark shadow is looking at to see Izuku, being aware of the reaction of the other. Good skill. Todoroki 320. Awareness of others' reactions. The next minute and a half are boring. No one else notices him. With less than 10 seconds left, a girl with dark green hair stretches and catches a sight of him at the corner of her eye. She startles and lets out a startled ribbit. Most of the class turns to look at her, but by the time they follow her line of sight, the time is up. Izuku writes Asui 4 minutes and 54 accidental technically passes, and stands up. The class has gotten loud and with exclamation of surprise and questions as Izuku makes his way to the front of the room. Hellspawn. Eraser says in a warning voice, and the class quiets. He settles in less than 5 seconds. Izuku offers him a small nod of thanks and hops up to sit on the teacher's desk before the man continues. This is Yuei's newest guest teacher. He will introduce himself as he sees fit in the moment, but first, ground rules. You will treat him the same respect you treat your other teachers. Any detention or punishment he assigns will be enforced as if they came from any other teacher, even if he's not here to supervise them. And yes, his class will factor into your final grade. So you better be paying attention. Is that understood? There's a chorus of "Yes, Sensei." From the class, Eraserhead then crawls into a bright yellow sleeping bag. That was totally a present from his husband, wasn't it? And the class turns towards Izuku, seeming unfazed. Honestly, That doesn't surprise Izuku. Eraser paroles and fights at night, so staying awake the entire day at school would be likely difficult. Izuku is glad the only teacher. Izuku is glad that he only teaches 1 or 2 hours a day when he's here, because he's also mostly a nighttime fighter. Brushing it off, Izuku addresses the class. Who can tell me how long I was in your classroom before Asui saw me and alerted the rest of the class? 3 hands go up, but not everyone that noticed. He calls on Todoroki first, wanted to see what was his best guess. 3 minutes. The boy says, closer than I expected you get, actually. What do you think that? The boy only noticed him about a minute and a half before Asui. Because I know I didn't notice you right away, the boy says flatly. Good job being aware of your own shortcomings. Now, you just need to work to improve them. Izuku says. He glances at the other 2 students that raised their hand. Jiro, what do you think? About 4.5 minutes, the girl says. Through it comes out also his question. 4 minutes and 54 seconds, actually. Izuku informs the class and sees Shinzo frown with an expression Izuku recognized from himself. It's the look of someone who is used to and has to come to expect discrimination in the classroom, even though it still hurts. To be fair, Shinzo's the only one who raises their hand that Izuku didn't call on, and with a vocal quirk he he's probably had teachers or even foster families, since Izuku knows he was adopted out of the foster system. They wouldn't let him talk or wouldn't respond if he did. In fact, Izuku would bet that if he looked closely enough, the boy would have muzzle scars. He'll figure out pretty quickly that Izuku isn't like that, though he notes Jiro and Todoroki's answers in the notebooks and turns to the purple-haired boy. Shinzo, who noticed me and when? Shinzo looks surprised, but doesn't hesitate long after answering. Aizawa Sensei noticed right away. His eyes would catch on for a second every time they swooped over their class. I think it took Jiro about 25 or 30 seconds, and Shoji took less than a minute. Dark Shadow noticed you after 3 minutes and alerted Tokiyami. Todoroki noticed them looking and saw you not long after. Sue saw you by accident just under 5 minutes after you came in, like you already said. And yourself? I noticed Sensei looking at you after about 20 seconds, I think. Shinzo says, looking away and sounding less sure than before. Eraser? Izuku asked, looking down at the cocooned man. Yes. It took him about 20 seconds. A rough voice comes from the floor without Eraser even bothering to make an appearance. Izuku nods and notes both Shinzo's actual time and how accurate his observations of his classmate were. That bumps Shinzo up to the top score for the exercise. With only 6 students passing, hopefully some of the students will get some points from the next exercise. Not that they seem to have realized they are getting graded on this yet. Now, raise your hand if you know who I am. Shinzo's hand is the only one that goes up. Well, since only one of you has an answer to that, well, we'll wait. What can you infer about me based on everything that had happened since I entered the room? Anything that has been directly told to you doesn't count. Only a few hands go up. Oh, come on, you can do better than that. Unless you're completely unobservant and you have to have some kind of observation about me. Hesitantly, a few more hands go up, and Izuku picks out one of the students who hasn't spoke yet. Ida, one observation, and what can you infer from it? You're clearly very good at stealth. It's likely something you put lots of work. Yeah, it's likely something that you have put lots of time into. The boy says, and wow, does this 15-year-old seriously still needs to learn how to use his inside voice? Okay, that's a start. I would hope that all of you picked up on that though. Izuku says, noting Ida's answer in his notebook under quick scrawled heading of observations and interference of me. Kirishima, what about you? What is the one thing you can infer, and why? Well, you're wearing a bunch of super manly gear, so you've got to be a hero, a red-haired boy says, and okay, sure, that's one way of describing it. Thank you for your answer, Izuku says, noting it down. Midoriya, your turn. What? But I wasn't raising my hand, the boy says. Izuku rolls his eyes. I'm aware of that. I never said I would only call on people who had their hands up. Give me an answer. We can hone your accuracy later. What is the one thing you infer on me based on your observation? Well, the boy hesitates, then blurts out, you're never gonna get any girls dressed like that. Izuku snores behind his masks and notes the answer down. It's funny because he is very gay. He's not trying to pick up anyone, male or female, in his costume. It is designed to hide his identity and protect them from injuries, as well as having easily accessible spots for all weapons and tools. Okay, who next? Hagakure, what have you got? Oh, her voice comes from the invisible girl, then short. Invisible girl stopped. You've worked with Aizawa-sensei before? Izuku waits for her to continue, but when it seems it's all she has to say, he prompts, what led you to that conclusion? He kept his voice encouraging and now wanted his words to sound like a reprimand. You called him a racer, which mostly only people who know him professionally do. He trusts you enough to let his guard down around you. Planes, and yeah, she's passing now. Those are good observations. She needs to work on her situational awareness still because she didn't notice him come in, but she's observant, and that's good. Good thinking. That's the most well thought out answer I've received to this question so far. Does anyone want to follow that? I'll pick someone with their hand raised this time. Izuku watches in amusement when most people's hands amuse as most of the hands in the room go down. Unfortunately, Bakugo is the only one who hasn't spoken yet, and his hand was raised. It was gonna be fun, but might as well get it over with. Bakugo, you're some kind of analyst or something. With that shitty notebook is anything to go by, he says over, and then that's not bad as he was not as bad as he was fearing. Izuku guessed that it's because the class was told to treat him like any other UA teacher. And from what Izuku knows, Eraser is pretty strict with his hero students. Izuku nods and writes down the answer. Alright, anyone else? Shinzo and Todoroki are the only ones with their hands up. But he wants Shinzo to go last, so because he just knows the purple hair boy will just blow pretty much everyone else out of the water. Alright, since no one new has their hands up, how about you, Todoroki? You're already grading us, the boy says, his voice flat. This is all some kind of test. That's why you're writing all of our answers down, right? Izuku smirks with his mask, knowing it's probably visible around his eyes and even his mask covering half of his face. That is correct. I am grading everything that happens while you are in this class with me. Luckily for most of you today, it's mostly just getting a baseline of where you're all starting. Now, knowing that this is going to go towards a grade, would anyone else who hasn't spoken yet like to answer? You can't get negative points. Quite a few hands go back up. Izuku looks between them. Eventually, he picks Ashito. The pink-haired girl puts her hand down and says, "You're protecting your civilian identity. Most of the teachers here teaches out of costume, or at least go by their civilian names. But you're in full costume, and it doesn't seem like you're gonna tell us your real name." Izuku nods. "Good. Uraka. You must have a decent amount of field work for you to have been brought in as a teacher. It has to be experience that is different than most of our other teachers." The girl says. The answer goes in his notebook with all the others. "Alright, Yaoyorozu? Can I build on Uraka's answer with my Can I build on Uraka's answer with my own inference?" Izuku considers this, then nods. Yaoyorozu continues. "I think you are or have been a vigilante. It would explain why you're experienced and you can teach us different than other teachers. That's why you keep your civilian identity a secret." That's a well thought out answer as well. Does anyone else have an answer that hasn't been said yet? Only half the hands left. The only hand left is Shinzo's at this point. Izuku makes eye contact. "Is your answer based only on what you could observe in this room and not based on previous information? You're the only one who has figured out who I am." "Yes, sir," the purple-haired boy says. Izuku would rather no one call him sir. Feels weird because he's younger than most of the students. If he was still going to school, he would be in the same year as them. Oh well. Go ahead then. What have you observed? You were given a profile on each of us before today. You already knew all of our names before you spoke to any of us, while most of the teachers take a few classes at least to learn everyone's name," Shinjo says. He hesitates before continue. "Am I allowed to make more on one observation since no one else has their hand raised anymore?" "Of course, as long as it's based on what you've learned from the observation without prior information." Izuku says that's why he saved Shinzo for last. After all, Shinzo seemed a little surprised at his answer, as that he answered his question verbally. Izuku can understand why. It's not like any hero student would be stupid enough to use their quirks on a teacher outside of training. Most of your gear is handmade or can be bought out of an ordinary store, indicating the lack of ability or unwillingness to buy the actual sport gear providers. You probably haven't taught before, or at least not in actual school, because you seem slightly uncomfortable with standing in front of the classroom. You are probably unused to having a lot of attention on you in general. I think everything else I have was either based on prior knowledge or already said," Shinzo says. "Very good. Would you like to tell everyone who I am?" Just my name, not any other information," Izuku offers. Shinzo nods. The Emerald Shadow. Correct. Now, have any of you other than Shinzo heard the Emerald Shadow? Izuku asks. A few hands go up. Now, for those of you who heard of the Emerald Shadow, what do you know about me? Commentary, you haven't spoken yet. You're a vigilante that mostly operates at night, and that's been active for about 1.5 years. Bond says, his answer written down. That is correct. Who has something to add? Or Drew? You're known to work with underground heroes, even daytime heroes, if they end up at the same time as you. Most heroes, even police and Mustafa, are set to trust you, at least professionally, the tail boy said. Also correct, Tokuyami? Izuku says, still writing Arjuro's answer as he speaks. You operate mostly at night. Got your name because you're a mad banquet of darkness when you fight, and you're essentially a vigilante version of a Twilight hero. The raven-head boy said. Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, Izuku says, writing down his answer. Let me fill in some gaps for all of you. I'm a vigilante in Mustafu, and I have been active for a little over a year and a half. I've known Eraserhead for all but the first month of that time, and he's helped me improve my skills when I was still starting out. We've worked together quite a bit, and I often worked with him and other heroes active during evening and night. I was given the name Green Shadow initially by the police and heroes when I first started getting noticed due to the color scheme of my costume and my stealth-based techniques. When I made it to media, someone decided that Green Shadow wasn't flashy enough and changed it to Emerald in their article. So that's how I became commonly known about a year ago. I used stealth and observation and analysis when I fight to even the playing field against people with combative or powerful quirks so that I can use people's own quirks against themselves. Now, does anyone have any questions for me? Our time is almost up. Why did you choose to become a vigilante? Uraka asked as she called out. I had a lot of reasons, some of which are mostly subconscious. I wanted to help people mostly, and I didn't believe I would be able to become a hero. I wanted to prove to all of the people who told me I'd never amount to anything that they were wrong, and even though none of them know who I am, Izuku explains. Anyone else? Ida. Should we call you Emerald Shadow Sensei, or would you prefer something else? The boy asked. Izuku really hoped that the mask hides the blush on his face. Just Shadow is fine. It's what most people call me. It's what most of the people I work with call me. Kaminari? Will we be having more classes with you, Shadow Sensei? The blonde asked. And that is not what Izuku meant when he said to call him Shadow. Yes, I agreed to lead 3 lessons for your classes to begin with. After that, I will decide whether I will continue teaching here. Then I may decide that I don't want to teach anymore, or Nezu and Aizawa decide not to ask me to come back. But you'll have at least 2 more lessons with me. I suggest you all study up on observation and situational awareness before I see you next, Izuku says, and before he can call another student, the bell rings. Eraser emerges from his sleeping bag. You Hellions get to lunch, he says in the class, and they all stand up and leave. Shinzo, Izuku says before the boy can leave the room. Could you stay behind for a moment? Eraser and the purple-haired boy look at him strangely, but he ignores it, hopping down from the desk once the room is empty except for the 3 of them. Izuku looks at Shinzo and says, I just want to make sure you know that I always call you last because I knew you would have the answers, and I wanted to give everyone else a chance to get some points. You never have to worry about quirk discrimination with me. Your dad wouldn't work with me if I was a quirkless asshole. Shinzo is silent for a long moment before he blinks. Whoa, his face really doesn't show much emotion. He must have gotten that from Eraser. You know? Yeah. He talks a lot about you, Izuku says, smiling under his mask. I have thought he was exaggerating your skills, parental pride and all that, but you're every bit as good as he told me. He talks about you a lot too. Hell, Papa keeps asking when he talks about you a lot too. Hell, Papa keeps asking when he's bringing you home, Shinzo says. I'm pretty sure he wants to adopt you. Eraser glares at his son. He actually wants to adopt every child I connect to. He was right with me, Shinzo shrugs. Anyway, while we're on the subject, subject. Hisashi is insisting that because you're working at UA now, he has to meet you, Eraser says. I can take you to the staff room, or you can come over for dinner tonight. I'm pretty sure if he didn't meet you today, I'll be sleeping on a couch until he does. You don't sleep anyway, Izuku says cheekily. Dinner sounds good though. If only because I'm tired of takeout and instant ramen. I'm seriously starting to wish someone had taught me to cook at some point. I'm sure Papa would be happy to teach you. I'm only allowed to use the kettle, the microwave, and the refrigerator in our kitchen now, and that's as helpless as I am. But I'm sure that you'll do better than us, Shinzo says. Izuku giggles a little. Does 7 work for you, problem child? Eraser asks. Yeah, sure. I'll bring my gear so we can patrol afterwards. Okay, problem child. We'll see you tonight. Get some sleep, Eraser says, running a hand over Izuku's hood in an affectionate gesture that has become familiar between them, and it makes Izuku feel warm inside. You're the one to talk, Izuku snarks before he leaves to do just that. Before he's out of hearing range, he faintly hears Shinzo say, Papa's right, isn't he? You're totally adopting him. So, this is the end of part 1. Sorry about my stuttering and repeating. My throat is killing me, and I have a headache, and I don't remember where I left my glasses. I think I left them upstairs, so it's kind of making it hard to read properly. You know, when you have dyslexia, plus you don't wear your glasses, it kind of fucks you up. So, yeah. Anyway, I really like this. I like that Zawa dynamic, and I love Shinzo being friends with Izuku, and them being like fucking ganging up on Aizawa, because it's just fucking hilarious, you know. It's like, yes. So anyway, I'll be posting separately the next part of the series, and I am excited to record the next part. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any criticism or suggestions, recommendation for fics, or even just want to tell me if there's anything I could do to improve my videos, just tell me, and I will read, and I always comment to most videos, to most comments, unless it's just something simple that doesn't really require a comment. But if I've seen it, I usually like it, unless it's something that's like really fucking like, what the hell did you send me kind of stuff, and like it's just inappropriate. But I haven't really gotten any of that yet, so most of the time I always like all the comments I read, just so people know that I've read them and I have acknowledged them. So yeah, so if you guys ever post a comment, you'll know that when I've seen it. Sometimes it takes me a few days because I do not get the notifications, and when I try opening up the videos, they don't pop up right away, the comments. They take a few days to start coming in sometimes. It mainly depends on the days, but yeah. Anyway, if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next part. Bye!